Now, we will talk about Princess Catherine being attacked by some of the UK media, seem to be painted in a really negative light by some of the media.
Last weekend, Catherine and William were hailed across front pages worldwide. The photographs of her, radiant in Diana's tiara beside the former US president, were splashed across international outlets. Commentators praised her poise, her health, her elegance. For a brief moment, the monarchy seemed steady again, but by midweek, the tone had flipped. On Thursday morning, September 12, a Daily Mail column appeared with a jarring headline: "The Prince and Princess of Boring." With that one phrase, triumph turned into controversy. In Windsor that morning, William unfolded the paper at breakfast. The words seemed to leap from the page. Catherine leaned closer, her voice low. "What does it say?" He hesitated. "They're calling us boring." For most families, such a line would pass unnoticed. But for the future king and queen, every headline carries weight. Each insult lingers in the record, stamped into the history of the crown. The timing was no accident. Only days earlier, Catherine had dazzled the world stage. Now, she was being accused of hiding, lacking spark, and even risking the king's displeasure. It was a deliberate reversal, designed to sting. Catherine's silence was her shield. William saw the flicker in her eyes. "It's just a headline," he tried to reassure her. "Headlines last longer than truth," she replied quietly. Within hours, the phrase was echoing across television panels and radio call-ins. By the weekend, it was being dissected on podcasts and late-night talk shows. Clips of Harry laughing with children were replayed as a vivid counterpoint, set against the quieter image of William and Catherine. The contrast was intentional. It was profitable. Observers quickly recognized the tactic. The column was not an offhand opinion, it was a stress test. If the public accepted the insult, more blows would follow. If outrage flared, the paper could pivot, issue a hollow apology, and still benefit from the spike in attention. And that is precisely what happened. 4 days later, on September 16, the same columnist reversed course, publishing a dramatic apology to Catherine. She praised the princess's full schedule, called her a valuable asset to the royal family, and professed regret for her earlier words. Inside Windsor, William read the piece with a tight jaw. "At least now she remembers you're valuable," he said bitterly. Catherine shook her head. "It's not an apology. It's a calculation." She was right. The attack had provoked fury. The apology was meant to contain it. But both had achieved their goal, keeping Catherine at the center of a media storm. From the glow of the tiara on September's world stage, to the cutting insult on the 12th, to the weekend frenzy and the sudden reversal on the 16th, the cycle revealed itself clearly. The press had no interest in fairness. What it wanted was drama, and Catherine's silence, whether strong or vulnerable, was part of the spectacle. Inside Windsor, the rule of the late Queen hung in the air. Never complain, never explain. It was their shield, but also their chain. William hated watching the press twist his wife's dignity into a weapon. Catherine endured, but she knew the storm was only beginning. And so, what started as one harsh headline quickly grew into a national argument over loyalty, legacy, and the future of the crown. The word boring hung heavy in the air between Catherine and William, an echo that seemed to follow them through the day. The silence inside the palace was deliberate. It was the silence of strategy. Yet beyond those walls, the noise was growing louder. The first ripples came on radio shows and morning panels. Commentators repeated Amanda Platel's phrase with glee, debating whether the couple had become too quiet, too invisible. One broadcaster laughed as he asked if the heirs to the throne were already old before their time. Others defended them, reminding audiences that Catherine was still regaining her health. The clash of voices was exactly what the newspapers wanted. Inside Windsor, the mood was different. Catherine moved through her morning with the quiet efficiency of someone used to enduring storms. She helped the children prepare for school. She smiled for them, though her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. William noticed, but he did not interfere. They had long ago agreed their children must never feel the burden of the press. When the children were gone, the silence returned. William sat at his desk, papers scattered around him, but he could not concentrate. He looked at Catherine. "They'll expect us to say something," he said finally. She shook her head. "And then tomorrow, they'll expect more. Once we start explaining, it never ends." It was the very principle taught by his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. Never complain, never explain. A rule that had carried the monarchy through decades of scrutiny. To the late Queen, it was the secret to survival. To William and Catherine, it was now both shield and chain. The world outside did not always understand this rule. In a culture where celebrities fought back instantly on social media, silence was easily mistaken for weakness. But for the royals, silence was meant to be power, the dignity of restraint, the authority of steadiness. And yet, William felt the tension rising in his chest. His mother, Diana, had been devoured by the same press. He had watched it as a boy, powerless to protect her. Now, he feared history was threatening to repeat itself, this time through words instead of flashbulbs. According to palace insiders, William wrestled with the temptation to issue a response. His advisors, however, warned him not to. Any statement would fuel the story. The press would pick apart every phrase, twist every word, and demand more the next time. The silence then was chosen, but it was not comfortable. Meanwhile, in newsrooms across London, editors tracked the reaction. Online metrics spiked, readers clicked, social media buzzed with debate. For the press, the experiment was working. For William and Catherine, it felt like a trap tightening around them. One commentator on a late-night program summed it up with chilling clarity. They've built their brand on being steady, family-oriented, reliable. But in the world of modern media, reliability doesn't sell. Drama does. And when there isn't enough drama, the press will create it. That was the heart of the problem. The royal couple's greatest strength, normalcy, quiet dignity, a stable family life, was the very thing being spun into a weakness. Later that evening, as they walked the halls together, Catherine finally broke the quiet. "They'll tire of it," she whispered. "Or they'll push harder," William replied. "It depends on whether silence is enough." The truth was, neither of them knew. What they did know was that their every choice or refusal to choose was being judged by millions. And in that judgment, their children's future, and the monarchy itself, was at stake. Experts noted that the timing of the attack was not random. With Harry returning briefly to the spotlight, the press was eager to draw comparisons. "The contrast sells," one analyst said. "Harry provides laughter and spectacle. William and Kate provide calm. By exaggerating one and belittling the other, the papers get exactly what they want. A narrative battle. It was a narrative battle Catherine had no desire to fight. But in a world where perception is power, she and William were already on the front line. By nightfall, the house was quiet again. Catherine sat by the window, looking out into the darkness. William joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "They want noise," he said softly. "Then we'll give them silence," she answered. Their decision was made. The rule of never complain, never explain would hold for now. But the headlines were multiplying. The pressure was building. And soon, the silence itself would be portrayed as another flaw. The storm was far from over. Because while William and Catherine chose restraint, another figure was being lifted into the spotlight. The newspapers were preparing their next move, and that move carried a name that haunted both of them, Harry. The silence of Windsor held, but outside the palace walls another voice began to rise. His name was everywhere again, Harry. For weeks, he had been moving through a carefully choreographed schedule, a so-called tour that stretched across 4 days. It was not an official royal tour, yet it carried all the trappings of one. Cameras followed his every step. Headlines praised his energy, his humor, his warmth. The timing was not lost on anyone. Just as William and Catherine were accused of hiding away, Harry was shown laughing with children, hugging veterans, speaking passionately at public events. The papers painted him in vivid colors, a reminder of the carefree prince the public once adored. And by contrast, William and Catherine were pushed deeper into the grey. One newspaper described Harry's tour as a return to the cheeky prince we all loved. Another called it a breath of fresh air for the monarchy. For readers scrolling quickly, the implication was clear. Harry brought joy. William and Catherine brought silence. Inside Windsor, Catherine noticed the pattern immediately. The children had already seen snippets on television. She switched it off gently, unwilling to let the contrast seep into their young minds. William, though, could not look away. He watched clips of Harry joking with school children and saw how effortlessly the press framed him as Diana's true heir. It stung. Not because William resented his brother's good moments, but because he understood the game. The same journalists who once shredded Harry now used him as a mirror to make William and Catherine appear smaller. It was manipulation dressed as reporting. Over dinner, Catherine spoke softly. "They're not lifting him up because they believe in him. They're lifting him up because it makes us fall." William nodded. He had long known this truth. The media did not deal in loyalty, only in spectacle. And Harry, whether knowingly or not, was the spectacle they needed. Observers called this tactic narrative contrast. By setting two images side by side, the press created drama without ever having to invent facts. William and Catherine's steady family life became dull. Harry's orchestrated appearances became joyful. The public, bombarded with the comparison, was invited to choose a side, but Catherine felt the injustice deeply. She had endured treatment, fought to keep her children's world intact, and still carried out her duties with grace. Yet her reward in print was mockery, while Harry's reward for staging appearances was celebration. "It's like Diana all over again," William said one evening, his voice tight. "The same cameras, the same smiles. Only this time they're not destroying him, they're using him." And he was right. Analysts pointed out that Harry's schedule, the sudden trip to Ukraine, the school visits, the charity appearances, could not have been arranged overnight. They were deliberate, planned months in advance, with full media cooperation. The press was not chasing Harry. They were partnering with him, building a narrative brick by brick. For William, the sense of betrayal ran deeper. He remembered walking beside Harry at their mother's funeral, two boys trapped in a spectacle they did not choose. They had once sworn to face the world together. Now, that bond was gone, replaced by headlines that played them against each other like pieces on a chessboard. Catherine, though quieter, carried her own burden. She worried not about herself, but about the message sent to the public. If dignity and restraint were mocked as weakness, what values were being rewarded? If spectacle was celebrated, what would her children grow up believing mattered most? Public reaction began to fracture. Some readers embraced the contrast, praising Harry's charisma. Others saw through the narrative and defended Catherine fiercely. "She's not boring," one letter to the editor read. "She's dignified, she's human, and that is exactly what we need." Still, the damage was done. The word boring now circulated alongside every mention of William and Catherine. It was repeated on talk shows, recycled in podcasts, embedded into memes. It clung to them like a label, while Harry basked in a glow not entirely his own. Late at night, William paced. "If we say nothing, we let the word stick. If we speak, we feed the fire. There's no winning this." Catherine touched his arm. "Then let's not play their game. Our life, our children, our work, those are real. The rest is noise." It was her way of grounding him, of reminding him that the monarchy had survived storms worse than this. Yet William could not shake the sense that silence was slowly being turned into a cage. Experts echoed his fear. "The danger is not the insult itself," one commentator explained. "The danger is the narrative it builds. If the public begins to believe William and Catherine are irrelevant, it weakens their foundation before they ever take the throne. That was the press's true power. Not just to report, but to shape perception, to turn virtues into flaws, to turn loyalty into weakness, to turn silence into invisibility. The couple knew the game. They had chosen their rule: never complain, never explain. But the press had chosen theirs: create a story, no matter the cost. And the story was growing, because while William and Catherine held their silence, Amanda Platel herself was about to shift position. The same pen that called them boring would soon bend in the opposite direction, offering an apology that rang hollow. The storm was evolving, and its next twist would prove just as calculated as the first. The storm did not fade, it shifted. Only 4 days after her stinging column, Amanda Platel returned to print. This time, her words were different. Gone were the accusations, the warnings, the sharp comparisons. Instead, she wrote of regret. "I am so disgusted with myself for the cruel things I said about Kate," she declared. "I am choking on my words now. I know the truth, Kate. I'm just so sorry." On the surface, it seemed like a remarkable reversal. A powerful columnist publicly admitting fault, offering contrition to the Princess of Wales. But for those who had followed the story closely, the turnabout smelled of strategy, not sincerity. Inside Windsor, William held the paper in his hand again. He read the apology once, then again, his face hard. Catherine glanced over his shoulder, then moved away without a word. "Well," William said bitterly, "at least now she remembers you're valuable." Catherine shook her head. "It's not an apology, William. It's a calculation." And she was right. Analysts quickly noted the timing. The backlash against Platel's first article had been fierce. Readers condemned the attack on Catherine, especially given her recent illness. Social media erupted with defenses of the princess. Podcasts and radio shows mocked the boring label, insisting that dignity was not dullness. The paper had misjudged public feeling, and they knew it. By retreating, by publishing a dramatic apology, Platel was not seeking forgiveness from Catherine. She was protecting her own credibility, and the paper's bottom line. The apology itself revealed the game. In it, Platel suddenly praised Catherine's hectic itinerary and called her a valuable asset to the royal family. The shift was so stark it felt jarring, almost theatrical. For readers paying attention, it was a performance. Catherine knew this instinctively. If it were real, she wouldn't have written the first piece at all, she told William. "She's playing both sides," he replied. "First the attack, then the apology. Either way, she wins." This was the cruel genius of the press. They could insult and injure one day, then repent the next, and still reap the profit of both. The outrage from the first article had driven attention. The apology now allowed them to appear balanced. To the newspaper, it was a perfect circle. To Catherine, it was hypocrisy. Experts pointed out another layer. "These reversals test the public mood," one commentator said. "They push, they provoke, then they retreat just enough to avoid collapse. It's not about truth or fairness. It's about keeping the drama alive." For Catherine, the drama was not abstract. It was personal. Each word, each headline, rippled through her life and her children's future. She carried herself with composure, but behind closed doors she felt the sting. She worried that repeated attacks, no matter how unfair, would leave permanent marks on her reputation. William carried his own anger. He despised the thought of his wife, the woman who had held their family steady through sickness and storm, being reduced to caricature by a pen. He remembered his mother, torn apart by the same cycle of praise and punishment. And now he saw Catherine walking the same dangerous path, yet still they chose silence. No statement, no response. They clung to the rule: never complain, never explain. But silence did not stop the narrative. If anything, it fueled it. The apology spawned more debates. Talk shows replayed both articles side by side. analyzing Platel's motives. Some praised her humility, others scoffed at her inconsistency. And through it all, Catherine's name remained in every headline, every broadcast, every conversation. At Windsor, William broke the tension with a weary laugh. They call you boring, then they call you invaluable. Which one is it this week? Catherine smiled faintly. Neither. I am who I am, and I won't let them decide that for me. It was her quiet defiance. She would not grant the press the power of shaping her identity, but even she knew the battle was larger than her personal resolve. The monarchy was fragile. Charles's health was uncertain. Public faith was shifting. In such a climate, every headline mattered more than ever. If William and Catherine were framed as uninspiring, it would weaken the very foundation they were meant to inherit. Observers were blunt. The apology is not the end, one media analyst warned. It's a reset. It clears the board for the next move. The press won't stop here. They'll push again, and harder. That was the reality the couple faced. Each headline was not just a momentary blow, it was part of a larger campaign, a cycle of build-up and tear-down designed to keep the monarchy in perpetual drama. Catherine knew it too. Late at night, as she walked the quiet halls of Windsor, she reflected on the weight of the crown she did not yet wear. She was not afraid for herself, but for the values she stood for: family, stability, service. If those values could be mocked as boring, what did that say about the world her children would inherit? William joined her at the window, gazing out at the gardens cloaked in moonlight. They think an apology erases the wound, he said quietly. Catherine shook her head. It only proves they'll cut again. The apology had not ended the storm. It had only changed its shape. The press had retreated, yes, but not in defeat. It was the pause before the next strike. And while William and Catherine braced themselves, the public was beginning to stir. The backlash to Platel's words had revealed something powerful. The people's loyalty to Catherine might be stronger than the press had anticipated. That loyalty was about to be tested, because the fight was no longer just between Catherine and the media. It was moving outward, into the hearts of the nation. And when the public took sides, the entire monarchy would feel the weight of their choice. The tide began to turn. What had started as a brutal attack soon became a rallying cry. Across Britain, voices rose in defense of Catherine. The insult that had been meant to diminish her instead revealed something far stronger: the bond between the Princess of Wales and the people she served. It began quietly, in letters to editors, in online comments, in radio call-ins. Parents spoke of how they admired Catherine for keeping her children's lives grounded. Cancer survivors wrote about her courage, about how her quiet dignity mirrored their own battles. Ordinary workers, who had met her on visits to schools and factories, told stories of her kindness, her attentiveness, her lack of ego. The narrative shifted. Catherine was not boring. She was steadfast. She was authentic. She was real. Meanwhile, the backlash against Amanda Platel's words grew fierce. Listeners abandoned the Daily Mail's podcast in droves. Social media campaigns urged people not to click, not to buy, not to feed the machine that profited from tearing down a woman recovering from illness. Hit them where it hurts. One viral post read, "In their pocket." Within days, the paper felt the sting. The apology had not softened the blow. If anything, it made the outrage sharper. Readers saw through it, recognizing the cycle for what it was: provoke, profit, retreat. This time, the people were refusing to play along. Inside Windsor, the shift did not go unnoticed. William read reports of the backlash, the numbers dropping, the anger rising. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders eased. "They're standing with you," he told Catherine one evening. She gave a small smile. "Not with me, with what we stand for." She was right. The public was not defending only Catherine as a woman. They were defending the values she embodied: family, service, humility. In a time of economic hardship, when life in Britain felt heavy with uncertainty, those values mattered more than ever. Catherine had become, almost by accident, a symbol of stability in a nation starved of it. Observers began to speak of her in new terms. "She's not glamorous in the Hollywood sense," one analyst said. "She doesn't chase headlines. That's why she resonates. People see their own lives in hers, the school runs, the small moments, the balance between duty and family. She represents the quiet strength the monarchy needs." The public reaction grew louder. Hashtags like #StandWithKate spread rapidly. Supporters posted photos of her visits, videos of her speeches, messages of gratitude. The attack meant to isolate her had instead drawn millions closer. William and Catherine watched this unfold with cautious hope. They knew the press would not back down for long, but they also knew something important had been revealed. Their silence did not leave them defenseless. They had the people. Still, Catherine remained careful. "We can't mistake this for protection," she told William. "The press will return. They always do." He nodded, though his expression was grim. "Yes, but this time, they'll know the people are watching." Experts agreed. The reaction to Platel's article was more than just outrage. It was a warning. "The British public will tolerate gossip about the royals, yes," one commentator explained. "They will tolerate scandal. They will tolerate criticism. But attacking Catherine, especially now, crossed a line. It awakened a sense of unfairness, and the monarchy depends on fairness. In the pubs, in the buses, in the markets, the talk was the same. Catherine had been wronged, and in defending her, the public was defending something larger, their idea of what the royal family should be. Late one night, William walked through the palace corridors and paused by the portraits of past monarchs. He thought of the times when public anger had destroyed reputations, when silence had not been enough. Then he thought of Catherine, standing calmly in the storm, and of the people who had risen to shield her. "They see you," he told her. "Not the headlines, not the gossip. You, and they won't let you be torn down." Her eyes softened. "That's why we can't fail them." Oh. The moment was quiet, but it carried the weight of truth. For the first time, Catherine felt not just targeted, but defended. And in that defense lay both hope and responsibility. Because the public's loyalty was not unconditional, it was earned, day by day, through service and sacrifice. And if she and William ever faltered, the same press that now retreated would be ready to pounce again. The backlash had humbled the newspapers. But in the larger game, it was only one move. The press could adapt. They could shift their targets. They could find new angles to spark conflict. The cycle was not broken, it was merely paused. And looming behind it all was another truth, one that neither Catherine nor William could ignore. King Charles's health was deteriorating. His reign, already fragile, seemed shorter with each passing day. Soon, the burden of the crown would pass to them, and the storms they faced now were only a glimpse of the gales to come. The nation had defended its princess, but soon it would demand its queen. And with Charles's shadow lengthening, the question could no longer be avoided. When the time came, would William and Catherine be ready to carry the crown into a future more uncertain than ever? The storm around Catherine had begun with a single word: boring. It had twisted into a media spectacle, a public backlash, and a moment of reckoning for the press. But behind the headlines, another storm was quietly building, one far more serious, far more consequential. It was the storm of succession. King Charles's health had become a subject of whispers. Nothing official was said, but the signs were impossible to ignore. Cancelled appearances, shortened schedules, vague palace statements. In the silence, speculation grew. How long did he truly have? For William and Catherine, the weight of those questions pressed heavier than any newspaper insult. Their silence on the boring scandal had been strategic. Their calm had been deliberate. But they both knew the truth. Soon, silence would no longer be an option. Soon, they would not be the heirs. They would be the monarchs. Catherine felt it most in the quiet hours of the night. She would walk the halls of Windsor, the portraits of past queens watching her with painted eyes. Elizabeth, Victoria, even Diana's photo in private corners, all reminders of what it meant to stand in that role, to carry not just a crown, but the burden of a nation. "I never wanted spectacle," she confessed to William one evening. "But maybe that's exactly what they'll demand." He looked at her, his expression a mix of pride and fear. "They don't need spectacle," he said firmly. "They need stability. They need you." Observers echoed this sentiment. "Catherine has become more than a royal consort," one analyst explained. "She is the symbol of continuity, the quiet power the monarchy desperately requires in a turbulent age." But symbolism was not enough. The monarchy itself was fragile. Britain faced economic struggle, political unrest, and growing skepticism about the crown's relevance. In such a climate, one wrong step could fracture public faith. And that was why the stakes were so high. Catherine was no longer just a target of gossip. She was the cornerstone of the monarchy's survival. If she faltered, if public loyalty weakened, the entire institution could begin to crumble. The press understood this. That was why their attacks carried such venom. They were not just selling papers, they were shaping the battlefield for the monarchy's future. Yet the backlash to Platel's attack had revealed a deeper truth. The people were not ready to let go of Catherine. They saw in her the values they cherished: family, resilience, quiet service. She had become their mirror, their anchor. And in defending her, they had defended the monarchy itself. Still, the path ahead was perilous. Charles's decline meant that the torch would pass sooner than expected. William and Catherine would be thrust into the highest roles under the harshest light. Every decision, every silence, every gesture would carry the weight of history. One evening, William stood by the window, looking out at the darkened grounds. He thought of his grandmother, the late Queen, who had carried her crown for 70 years without complaint. He thought of his mother, who had been torn apart by the same press now circling Catherine. And he thought of his wife, steady at his side, facing storms she had never asked for. "They'll come for us again," he said quietly. Catherine placed her hand in his. "Then we'll face them together." "Ah!" Her words were simple, but they carried the strength of promise. It was the strength the monarchy would need in the years ahead. Because the truth was unavoidable, the next chapter of the British monarchy was about to begin. And it would begin not with Charles, but with William and Catherine. The world was watching. The press was circling. The people were waiting. And the question hung in the air like a thunderclap. When the crown finally passes, will William and Catherine be strong enough to lead the monarchy into its most uncertain era yet? Thank you for staying with us through this special investigation. If you value deep dives into the hidden battles of the royal family, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And above all, keep watching, because this storm is only the beginning.